Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first video of the Antisemitism in Canada Digest. As you see, it's not the very first one in general. I've been making them for a while, and as it stands, it doesn't seem like I'm going to finish making them anytime soon. So it comes in a new format now. All the Jews in Canada are asking themselves, how much worse can it get? Is it going to get significantly worse? Is it time to flee? Maybe that's the scariest question. So far, it's not the time to flee, but some people choose to move to places that seem better. For example, the former GNF executive director and former director of Friends of Simon Wiesenthal, and a good friend of mine, relocated his family to the US. And in his farewell post, he described the reasons: cost of living, the economical opportunities, the healthcare system, but very importantly, also the rampant anti Semitism in Canada. And there is no better illustration to the anti Semitism as in comments in Dallas's retweet of his post about how the country is infected by Jews, or most of Canada's problems stem directly from the Zionist mafia. The language of the graffiti is becoming more radical. For example, here you can see the death to the IDF. This phrase is becoming very popular. This one is slightly more subtle, but arguably even darker. You can read Jews kill kids, and notably, it is scribbled on a Justice for Jared poster. This is a campaign that claims that Jared was an innocent man killed by the RCMP. But in fact, he was indeed killed by the RCMP after resisting arrest, trying to escape, and stabbing a police dog to death. So it sounds like an appropriate poster to spread lies about Jews. I always try to give credit where credit is due. Last week, the VPD posted a video where they featured the leader of Samidun, David Duart, and other Samidun activists and organizers, and called the protests peaceful and lawful. But this week, they took the video down. Out of all things that can be attributed to ignorance or malice, 95% turn out to be ignorance. Ideally, the police should be more knowledgeable about various hostile groups operating in Canada. I seriously doubt that they know who these people are. So these are the MEK, the Iranian communists, basically, who helped bring the Islamic regime to power, and then they were cast aside, prosecuted, executed, or fled. They are anti-Islamic regime, but they're also anti-Israel. And just in general, comparing socialists and Islamists, I cannot really decide which ones scare me more. Here you can see healthcare workers rallying in front of the Vancouver General Hospital against the non-existing genocide, collecting signatures for a petition, wearing keffiyehs, selling keffiyehs, the symbol of Palestinian terrorism, and also serving watermelon. Watermelon, just in general, is one of the most primitive lies of the Palestinian propaganda. If you ask any person with watermelons on their social media or their t-shirts or backpacks or whatnot, what does the watermelon symbolize? In best case, they will tell you that because the evil Zionists forbid and ban Palestinian flag, the colors of the watermelon match, and this is why the watermelon is used. It's really easy to debunk this lie because you can see even in Tel Aviv there are multiple protests over the years where people actually wave Palestinian flags even after the beginning of the war, which I find a little unfortunate. But Israel is a free country, and good luck finding Israeli flags at the protests in Palestinian government territories. Shortly after October 7, a woman I met at a pro-Israel rally told me a joke that her daughter heard from a classmate 10 years ago in a public school in Vancouver. And the joke went like this: how many Jews fit into an ashtray? And here is a report on anti Semitism in Ontario K 12 schools. It was published this week. It gathered data from almost 600 parents, detailing nearly 800 anti Semitic incidents starting in October 2023 and until January 2025. This is approximately 3 incidents per day. In this graph, you can notice that the percentage of incidents was actually higher in 2023, before there was even any so-called genocide. The incidents listed in the report include Nazi salutes, shouts of Sieg Heil, glorification of the Holocaust, calling Jewish student terrorist, rapist, baby killer, Physical assaults, hitting, pushing, spitting, throwing objects, vandalism, bomb threats, shooting at Jewish school, all sorts of incidents. What is scary is that nearly 1 in 6 anti-Semitic incidents were either initiated by a teacher or involved administration or the school board. For example, a teacher called a child with one Jewish parent half human. A teacher denied Israel's existence, wore T-shirts that display a map of Israel overlaid in colors of the Palestinian flag. School trustees wore keffiyehs at meetings, and biased and radical speakers were invited to downplay October 7 and to present one-sided narrative of the conflict. Nearly half the reported incidents were just ignored. In another nearly 10% of incidents, the anti-Semitic nature was denied. In some cases, the action proposed by the administration effectively punished the victims, for example, suggested to remove the Jewish child from school or have them attend virtually. This is a very convenient way for the administration to solve problem without actually solving the problem. In one of the anti-Israel accounts, I found this graphic that ranks different Canadian universities by how genocidal and racist they are. And of course, when they say genocidal and racist, they mean exactly the opposite, that the university does not support Hamas. And I was going to suggest to use this as a guide to choose universities for your children until I noticed that actually they graded Concordia the worst. So it would have been translated the best, but we all know how horrible Concordia is. So probably this rating is not really something we can use. The University of Gulf that is missing from the chart. On July 7, they fired business professor Paul Finlayson. He spent almost 2 years in suspension after he calls Hamas barbaric and compared the anti-Israel slogans to Nazism. He was suspended without hearing, barred from campus, and ultimately dismissed. I really hope that he pursues legal action and gets some justice. In the meantime, you should support Paul by subscribing to his blog. It's called Freedom to Offend. In reality, none of the Canadian universities actually oppose terrorism strongly enough. The UBC is working on a framework for responsible investment. Uh, they claim that their goal is to develop a framework that will be shared across all universities, but this work is being done behind closed doors. And I suspect that unfortunately they will come up with some stupid divestment recommendations. A few weeks ago, sit-ins were announced to happen in Canada, demanding to bring more Gazan relatives into Canada, and they happened this week. As you can see here, not many people showed up, but the ones that did are workers for Palestine. These are unions. And considering the poor state of the Canadian economy, I would like the unions to focus domestically, but instead they engage in this activism. Considering the amount of aid that is already sent to Gaza now and was sent before the war, and how Hamas is using it, and considering that many Gazans have no official ID, so it's really hard to do background checks, I suggest you sign this petition to not bring Gazan refugees to Canada. It is at nogazarefugees.com. This funny video doesn't only show how incompetent the Canadian immigration minister is, but it also teaches us that asylum seekers' claims take roughly 4 years, and during this time, the asylum seekers get free housing, free food, free healthcare, work visas, clothing, and a lot more things, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And to make it even worse, this week the Canadian government announced that Canadians will start to receive invitations for parents and grandparents sponsorship visa, and the aim is to approve 10,000 sponsorship applications until the end of the year. We have financial crisis, housing crisis, healthcare crisis, and apparently there is no better way to deal with it than bring in thousands of elderly people into Canada. On a highway in Ontario, you can see this truck with Palestinian flags and an electronic board that says "Stop the genocide, stop the occupation of Palestinian lands," and then it goes on and on about Israeli government lobbyists buying Western politicians, demonizing the resistance, which is Hamas, of course. It is actually ironic because there are countless organizations that are solely dedicated to legitimizing Israel, and yet they accuse Israel of doing the very same things. Some of these organizations that are solely dedicated to demonizing Israel are unfortunately Jewish. So they host Gabor Mate, another known Jewish anti-Semite, and there is many organizations listed here. Some of them are Canadian, so here is the Independent Jewish Voices and International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and many more with similar names, Jewish Voices for Peace, and others from other countries. A very interesting report came out this week from the American government. It is fascinating. It describes how USAID was used to fund anti-Netanyahu movements in Israel and North America. It confirms the connections that I exposed before between openly anti-Israel groups, including those in Canada, and anti-Israeli government organizations. So somewhere here we can find a diagram that actually shows Samidun and New Israel Fund. If you haven't seen my earlier research on this, you can see it on my Twitter as well. And I just want to clarify a couple things because people often get confused. So I never say that everyone that rallies against Netanyahu is being paid. Some follow the call of their hearts. I know people like that personally, and they're not paid. But similarly, not everyone who rallies for Hamas is being paid. But the funding that exists, and it is generous funding, as we can see, is most certainly contributing to the volumes of propaganda. And some of it propaganda, unfortunately, finds its way into people's hearts. Now, for the purpose of this exercise, I am not pro and not against the Israeli government, but I see that people who rally against the government mostly say very similar things to the things that are being said in the anti-Israel protests. One of the key things that they say is the war continues because it helps Bibi's politics and his political agenda. Now, this is very nuanced, but whoever hears it basically hears that the war is Israel's fault and Hamas is not being mentioned and is absolved of responsibility. So this is harming Israel and this is harming Jews abroad. The anti-government Jews and the anti-Zionist Jews have one very clear thing in common. They think that if Jews behaved better, for example, did not have a country, or for example, elected a different government, if only Jews were better and different, the anti-Semites would stop being anti-Semites. But when we look at this Toronto-based owner of cybersecurity consulting firm and the licensed registered firearms owner that calls Jews vile creatures and the scum of the earth and posts anti-Semitic caricatures, it kind of gives me a hint that he will hate Jews even if Israel had a different government or was destroyed altogether. Another individual, an Uber driver from Toronto, complained that he felt uncomfortable because his passengers mentioned Israel during their drive. This guy, Shahir Kasim, threatened the flight instructor and hijacked a Cessna plane at Victoria International Airport. It took US fighter jets to respond to the hijacking because Canada doesn't have any available. This is a topic for a different digest. But when the police reported that the hijacking had an ideological motive, they didn't specify which motive was that. So this is what the hijacker posted on his Facebook. I'm a messenger of Allah. I'm the Messiah sent to save humanity from climate change. Can anyone please assist the Canadian police in deciphering what the motive is? Last year, the BC provincial government was really proud about the BC anti-racism hotline that they created. And this week, a person from Victoria tried to use this hotline and called to report the t-shirt that was sold at a Pride event. The t-shirt featured the word Intifada. Below it says, "May the children of Gaza dance on the rubble of Zionism." And on the picture, you can see children dancing on an Israeli tank with the Palestinian flag. So basically, this is the image of October 7th. The call taker on the BC hotline responded saying that Intifada is peaceful and also added that there is a genocide, and both statements are obviously lies. Vancouver's Communist City Councillor Sean Orr performed on stage. He was holding a Palestinian flag, and I will spare you the sound of his screaming because you listened this far in my video and I'm really grateful. But basically, he was screaming, "Got a fight for what's right. His kindred spirit, Craig Suave, a failed federal NDP candidate who luckily didn't win. Now he's campaigning to become the mayor of Montreal. I don't know French, but here you can see that his entire platform was basically anti Israel and nothing more. I think both Craig and Sean Orr take big inspiration from Zoran Mamdani. One of my least favorite people in Canada, Amira El Gawadi. Oh my God, I never tried to pronounce her last name until now. She's Canada's representative for combating non existent Islamophobia. So this week she was fined because her speaking engagement violated the Conflict of Interest Act. This was a really symbolic little fine, but this is a reason to draw attention to her past misconducts. In her letter in 2019, she claimed that Quebecers were driven by anti Muslim sentiment in passing the secularism law, which she described as tyrannical. And she had to apologize for this letter later. But in 2024, she urged universities to hire more Muslim, Palestinian, and Arab professors. So basically, Islamophobia is a code word for not giving Muslims preferential treatment or giving Muslims preferential treatment that isn't preferential enough. And it's never enough. And also, more importantly, Islamophobia is a hoax because it is not a phobia if the fear is justified. I think this tweet is hilarious, but even if you don't like Gad Saad's humor, his jokes shouldn't be a reason for safety concerns, and yet they are. But another thing that I find hopeful and a little reassuring, it happened in Montreal this week. As you might know, Muslims often block public spaces and streets in Toronto and especially in Montreal, including in front of the Notre Dame Basilica in Montreal for public prayers, which is absolutely unacceptable. And this Sunday, there was a protest in front of the Notre Dame Basilica where people came together and declared that streets of Montreal are not open air mosques. Let's listen to this.
Les rues de Montréal ne sont pas des mosquées en plein air. Les rues de Montréal ne sont pas des mosquées à ciel ouvert.
This is music to my ears. I can listen to it on repeat. I want to be optimistic and I want to believe that Canadians will eventually wake up and will fight back for their country, for our country. The later it happens, the longer it will take and the heavier the price will be to pay. But I hope that one day this will become just a chapter in a history book, a dark chapter. The only question is when. Thank you.